We are learning more about what happened behind the scenes with the grand jury in the Breonna Taylor case. A member of that jury is now saying that the Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, never gave them the option to charge officers with murder. They also said that the grand jury did not agree that certain actions were justified. So meantime, we are hearing for the first time from one of the officers involved in the raid who ended up getting shot in the leg by Taylor's boyfriend. This is what Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly explained to ABC News about that night.
It's not a race thing like people want to try to make it to be. This is a point where we were doing our job. Each time when we go in, I get shot, we return fire. This is not us going hunting somebody down. This is not kneeling on a neck. This is nothing like that.
Erica, is this different from George Floyd? And was that officer just simply doing his job and we are blaming the wrong people? What do you make of that?
I think what happens is when we talk about systemic racism and the idea that certain institutions need to be dismantled or reformed, such as police departments, we're talking about an ideology that projects this perception of guilt or the need to get less justice for Black and brown people. I really want to clarify something about AG Daniel Cameron, because in terms of the grand jury's findings and the transcripts being released, I think it's important that we go back to that press conference the day that he talked about the grand jury findings.
While there are 6 possible homicide charges under Kentucky law, these charges are not applicable to the facts before us because our investigation showed and the grand jury agreed that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in the return of deadly fire after having been fired upon by Kenneth Walker.
So the key there is that he said that their investigation found and the grand jury agreed. But now what we now know is that the grand jury couldn't have agreed because those weren't the facts or evidence presented in front of the grand jury. It is so rare that a judge would rule that a grand jury proceeding would be open to the public. Daniel Cameron at this point is a man on an island, and I, for one, am not surprised by that. I'm just interested in seeing who comes to his defense as this continues to go on.
Erica, let me bring in some comments, Al, and then jump in, please, because I always want to bring in our DBL Nation. Billy on Facebook writes, what is an officer supposed to do when they're fired on? Firing back is what they're trained to do. May on Facebook says, I don't think the officers should be scapegoated. Blame the people who authorized the raid without doing their homework. Al.
No, I'll just say this, Erica, as you were just so eloquent in your comments. I'm going to pull back and let's look at the forest and not just the one tree. The question is, why were they there using that kind of force? Before the show started, Sam, you and I were talking about that Big Pharma, Purdue Pharma just filed for bankruptcy and was found guilty on 3 federal charges. They need to pay out $8 billion, and they are responsible for 2,000 localities that they were apparently selling opioids illegally. Well, that's 2,000 places where we know for a fact major drugs were being sold. Drugs, let's call them what they are. Why don't we ever see this situation with opioid sellers? Why don't, of all those 2,000 cities, where are the doors being kicked in? Where are the 8 people on their knees with their fingers interlocked? Why don't we see the same police force being laid out at our country's colleges where illegal drugs and alcohol is rampant? We only see policing in certain areas, and you're going to have this from time to time.
Right, but then we need reform then. And what I'm seeing constantly online, especially from our viewers right now, and let me just paraphrase because there's so many people saying the same thing. Why aren't we pushing for reform? Because if the police officers were justified to do what they did, how is there supposed to be justice if it makes sense?
Well, nothing is going. Nothing's going to happen, Sammy.
Yeah, but okay, Erica. I know that. Sorry, we have to go, and I'm trying to finish my point, but I know that we're out of time. Okay, I can keep talking.
Yes,
Thank
please.
you. Sorry, I'm trying to save time. Listen. And I'm just paraphrasing. Are we blaming the wrong people here? Are we blaming the police officers when they were justified to fire? Now, I hear your point. Why can't people be focused on reform rather than pointing fingers at police officers that were trained to do what they were supposed to do? Why not focus on retraining them? to prevent other Breonna
because
Taylor
it's a
situations.
failure in the system.
Right.
It has been my thought and just my opinion that the reason why it took so long to even get this slow crawl to what seemed like it could have been justice and it wasn't for Breonna Taylor is because so many other people on top would have been implicated in this. It has always been my belief that the big part of this story that we haven't really talked a lot about is the gentrification and also AG Daniel Cameron's political ambition, in my opinion. And if we are going to go after the police officers, then the police officers are going to say that the no-knock warrant shouldn't have been issued, which is what we're hearing. And then whoever issued the no-knock warrant has to say the reason why this no-knock warrant was issued, especially in that part of the city. And then city planners have to say what they were planning on doing. So it's like there's so many things. This is an epic failure of the system, but the truth is, in my opinion, that the system wasn't set up for protection of Breonna Taylor's and people like her.
That's exactly right, and that's why there needs to be reform, and I pray that there won't be other Breonna Taylors, and the Breonna Taylor law will be nationwide mandated. That's a no-knock warrant.